In this activity, we'll be working with option combinators. Once you're ready, open up Visual Studio Code and we'll get started. Once Visual Studio Code loads, navigate to your activities directory. We are on activity 23, so double-click on A23. Once the activity file loads, review the topic and program requirements. Attempt to implement a solution on your own with the video paused. Once completed, resume the video and I will demonstrate my implementation as well as provide insights to the activity topic. As we can see, this topic is about option combinators. Our requirements are to use combinators as described in the functions part 1, part 2, and part 3. There's other functionalities implemented in this program, but we're only going to deal with these ones here. Our notes indicate that we should use cargo test to check the program. So we're going to be utilizing the built-in test tools in order to make sure that we've completed the activity properly. A quick overview of the program before we begin. We have an access enumeration. We have a function named maybeAccess that returns an optional access. We have a root function that also returns an optional access. And this function just returns administrator access. We also have a test module, and this test module will simply check each part to ensure that we did it properly. To begin, it's a good idea just to try to run the tests right away and see what we get. It might lead us in the right direction. I'll type in cargo test --bin A23 just as the instructions noted. And here we have a lot of errors. We have mismatched type errors. We jump to 34. We'll see here that part 1 returns a Boolean value, but the maybeAccess function returns an optional value. We can see that the option is here, so we'll start with part 1. Our comments indicate that we are checking whether or not this particular user has an access level. The admin user does have an access level, so we're checking if admin has an access level. As we can see here, it does have an access level, which is admin. We're not concerned which access level it actually is, just whether or not it does have one. Our notes indicate that we need to use isSum or isNone. We know that admins do have an access level, so I'll use isSum as the function. This will return true because we know admin is listed here in the match expression. Next, we'll move on to part 2. Root is equivalent to access admin, but it is not listed in the maybeAccess function. Take a quick look, we can see that indeed there's only admin and Gary, nobody else is listed. So when we call maybeAccess, we'll get back a none value because it's not listed here. However, this user should always be an admin. In order to ensure that's the case, we can use .or_else and then pass in the root function. When this function returns none, it will then execute the function provided here within the closure. Since we know for sure that root does return none since it wasn't listed, this will always execute, which will run this function, and the root function returns the admin access within an option, which is the return value that we need here as part of our part 2 function. Finally, part 3, Alice is not a listed user, so she will be a guest. If we take a look at the maybeAccess function, we can see that Alice is not listed, so she'll just have no access, but we want to make sure she has guest access. To do that, we can use unwrap or else, and then we simply supply the proper access, which will be guest. Let's save it and make sure that it compiles. We may have some errors in here. On line 41, I forgot to actually call this function, so we'll just call the function, and there we go. All of our tests check out okay. Combinators provide an easy method for you to modify data and change the behavior of your program based on the data at hand. In part 1, we can see that we're just checking whether or not some data exists with isSum. In part 2, we are supplying default information using or_else. And in part 3, we are again supplying default information, except we're also taking the inner value and returning it. This concludes the activity on option combinators. I'll see you in the next presentation.